There's a dress hanging on the back of the closet door. Deep green, a little daring at the collar, bought on impulse 2 years ago and worn exactly once. Tonight it's coming off the hanger again because a friend is turning 70 and there's a dinner. And something about the invitation made you think, why not? You slip it on. It still fits differently than it used to fit. Softer in some places, looser in others. But as you smooth it down with both hands, you notice something strange. You're not checking for flaws. You're not doing the old inventory, the one you used to run without even realizing it. Stomach, arms, chin, repeat. You're just standing there, feeling the fabric, feeling like yourself. And that catches you off guard more than the dress does. Because there was a version of you, decades ago, who couldn't get dressed for a dinner party without a small storm of self-criticism running underneath every choice. So what changed? Something happened tonight that would have seemed impossible to the version of you standing in this same spot 40 years ago. Somewhere between smoothing down that fabric and reaching for your earrings, you realized you feel more beautiful right now than you did at 30. Not in spite of everything that's happened since, because of it. And the reason has almost nothing to do with what you'd expect. That's really what this is about tonight. Not skincare, not miracle habits, not some secret nobody told you. It's about something quieter and much more interesting. Why so many women say, often to their own surprise, that they feel more beautiful now, past 60, than they ever did at 30. Not despite the years, because of them. Have you ever noticed how much of feeling beautiful when you were younger depended on someone else's eyes? A glance across a room, a comment from a stranger, the silence that felt like judgment when no one said anything at all. You were beautiful back then, but you experienced it secondhand, filtered through what you imagined other people thought, which is a strange and exhausting way to live inside your own body. At some point, without a ceremony or an announcement, that filter starts to fall away. Maybe it happens after you raise children who stop needing you to be flawless and start needing you to be present. Maybe it happens after a marriage ends or a marriage deepens, after you bury someone you loved and understand in your bones, that nobody on their deathbed wishes they'd worried more about their thighs. However it happens, one day you catch yourself getting ready for something and you realize you're not performing for an audience anymore. You're just getting ready. And that shift from performing to simply being is where something in your face actually starts to soften. I wonder if you felt this too. The particular relief of no longer comparing. When you're younger, comparison is almost involuntary. You walk into a room and some quiet, tireless part of your brain is already ranking. Younger, thinner, prettier, more put together. It's a habit built by decades of magazine covers and, later, by scrolling past filtered photos of women who don't exist in real light. But somewhere in your 50s or 60s, that ranking system starts to run out of batteries. You look at another woman, and instead of measuring yourself against her, you just think, what a nice color on her. Or, she looks happy. The comparison muscle, so overworked for so long, finally gets to rest. And here's the strange part. Once the comparison disappears, you don't just see other women differently. You begin seeing yourself through kinder eyes too. And when it rests, something in your expression changes. People can't always name it, but they notice it. They call it presence, or warmth, or grace. What it actually is the absence of that old, silent competition. Nobody sits a young woman down and tells her in plain words that her worth is being measured against every other woman in the room. It happens sideways, through advertisements, offhand comments, the particular silence that falls when a woman ages in public. You absorb the rules without ever agreeing to them. Unlearning something you never consciously chose to believe takes time. Not one decision, but 1,000 small moments of noticing the old habit and gently choosing not to follow it. But something even more surprising happens once comparison fades. You start to look at your own face differently too. Think about your hands for a moment. Not your face, your hands. The lines across the knuckles, the slight looseness of the skin, maybe a faint scar from decades ago, maybe the ghost of a wedding ring you don't wear anymore. Have you ever looked at your hands and felt something closer to respect than criticism? These hands held babies at 3 in the morning. They wrote condolence cards. They planted things that grew and pulled weeds that didn't want to leave. They know how to hold another person's face when that person is. Your face is no different. Every line is a record, not a flaw. The ones at the corners of your eyes are from decades of things that were actually funny. The softness along your jaw is from years of resting your head on people you loved. When you begin to see your face as a kind of memoir instead of a mistake, the whole relationship changes. You stop trying to edit the story. You start reading it with something like tenderness. Beauty didn't arrive the day your wrinkles disappeared. It arrived the day you stopped apologizing for having them. There's an old habit of speaking about aging as though it were a series of losses. But loss was never the whole story. What actually happened, underneath all that language of losing, was a slow and steady gain. You gained the ability to walk out of a room that didn't deserve you. You gained a that that comes from your whole chest instead of a polite little exhale. You gained the specific, hard-won knowledge of what actually matters when a doctor calls with news, or when a friend is grieving. None of that shows up on a scale in any way you were taught to measure, but it shows up in your face all the same, in the steadiness of your gaze. It might help to think of it this way. Nobody looks at a beautiful old house and mourns the fact that it isn't new construction. They notice the details that only time could have created. The worn place on a banister where 1,000 hands have rested. The particular way the light falls through windows that have watched decades of ordinary mornings. A brand new house is clean, and it's fine, and it has absolutely nothing to say. The house that's lived a life has character, has story, has a kind of beauty that can't be built quickly, no matter how much money you throw at it. You are the house with the worn banister, and everyone who walks through your door can feel the difference, even if they couldn't explain it. And perhaps that's why people feel at home around you now, in a way they never quite did before. They aren't drawn to perfection. They're drawn to a life that feels real. Can you relate to that feeling? Of finally being on your own side? There's a particular kind of peace that comes from no longer being at war with your own reflection. The peace comes from finally directing toward yourself the same kindness you've spent a lifetime directing toward everyone else. You forgave your best friend for her worst year. You forgave your children for their teenage cruelty. And at some point you realized you'd never once extended that same grace to the woman in the mirror. Not until now. A woman can spend 40 years being the person everyone else calls when they need patience, when they need someone who won't judge them for falling apart, and still speak to her own reflection in a tone she would never use on anyone she loved. Somewhere along the way, most of us learned to extend that same defense to ourselves too. Not overnight. More like a long, slow softening. The kind that happens the same way trust rebuilds after a hard year. Until one day you notice the war is simply over, and you can't quite remember when the last shot was fired. If these conversations remind you that your best years are still unfolding, I'd love for you to subscribe to Her Golden Chapter. Every week we share thoughtful conversations like this one, and I'd love for you to be part of them. Can I tell you something that surprised me the first time I noticed it? The women I find most beautiful now are almost never the youngest women in the room. Have you noticed that too? Somewhere along the way, beauty quietly stopped meaning perfection and started meaning something else entirely. Something closer to presence, to warmth, to a kind of ease that no amount of youth can fake. There's something else worth sitting with, something almost nobody tells you until you live it yourself. Peace changes the way your face actually looks. Not in some abstract greeting card way. Literally. Tension holds itself in the jaw, the brow, the set of the mouth. A woman who is bracing for judgment carries that bracing in her features, whether she means to or not. And a woman who has made some kind of peace with her life carries an entirely different kind of stillness in her face. That stillness reads, to almost everyone who sees it, as beauty. Not youth, beauty. They are not the same thing, and it takes most of us decades to understand the difference. You've likely seen this in your own family. Think of an older aunt, a grandmother, a neighbor from childhood, someone whose face you can still picture clearly, even though she was never the kind of beautiful that magazines were selling. What you remember is the warmth that came off her, the way a room seemed to settle when she walked into it. It's something that only shows up after a woman has stopped fighting herself, and it's often the very thing people mean when they say someone has gotten more beautiful with age, even when, technically, nothing about her face has improved at all. Then, without realizing it, you start dressing differently too. Not for approval, not to disappear, but because a certain color makes you feel like yourself, or a certain cut moves the way you like to move. You start choosing clothes the way you might choose a friend, not because they're impressive, but because they're honest. Your shoulders find a new posture. Your walk finds a new rhythm. People who knew you at 40 sometimes say you seem more yourself now than you did back then, and they're not wrong. Can you relate to the strange moment when other people start responding to you differently before you've even fully noticed the shift in yourself? A neighbor mentions, almost in passing, that you seem lighter lately, happier, though nothing obvious in your life has changed. At first you might brush it off, assume it's a coincidence, but it happens again. People are drawn toward ease the way they're drawn toward warmth on a cold afternoon, without always knowing why. What they're responding to is the absence of that old bracing you carried for so long without realizing it was even there. It's a strange kind of magnetism, and it has almost nothing to do with how you look in the conventional sense. It has to do with how safe you feel to be around. Think about the people you've always gravitated toward, not the ones who turned heads walking into a room, but the ones who made you feel within minutes like you could exhale. That feeling you give someone else becomes one of the most attractive things about you. So what happens next, once the comparison fades and the peace settles in and the dressing becomes an act of self-respect instead of self-defense? Something even quieter happens. You stop chasing perfection, and in stopping, you find something perfection was never going to give you: ease. Ease shows up in the body long before you have words for it. It's in the way you sit at a dinner table now, shoulders down, not pulled up around your ears the way they used to be. It's in the way you laugh now, louder, less apologetic, without that reflexive hand rising to cover your mouth. None of these are dramatic changes. No one would point at you on the street and be able to name exactly what's different. But you feel it in your shoulders, in your jaw, and that feeling is worth far more than anything a mirror could confirm. Perfection is a moving target. It always was. No matter how carefully you managed your appearance at 30 or 40, there was always another flaw waiting to be discovered. Chasing it is exhausting precisely because it cannot be caught. But ease is available right now, in this room, in this body, exactly as it is today. And the women who radiate something people can't quite name are almost never the ones who look flawless. They're the ones who look at ease. Joy does something to a face that no cosmetic ever could. You've probably felt this yourself, watching an older woman throw her head back at something genuinely funny, and thinking, without quite meaning to, she is stunning right now. That wasn't youth you were seeing. That was aliveness. It's worth remembering, too, that perfection was never really about beauty at all. It was about control. The fantasy that managing every detail carefully enough could guarantee approval, safety, love. But the people you love most don't love you because you're flawless. They love you because of the specific, imperfect, entirely human way you show up for them. Once that truth settles in, chasing perfection starts to feel less like ambition and more like an old habit you're ready to put down. I'd love to hear from you on this one. When did you first look in the mirror and realize you had finally stopped being so hard on yourself? I'd genuinely love to hear your story below. Here's the part that might be hardest to believe until you've lived it. None of this required you to look like anyone else, or even like your younger self. It required you to finally stop measuring yourself against a version of beauty that was never really about you. What you found instead was something sturdier. Self-acceptance instead of self-improvement projects that never end. Wisdom instead of anxious guessing. Peace instead of performance. And somewhere inside all of that, your own particular kind of beauty. The one that was always yours. The one no one else could have worn quite the way you do. Maybe that's the dress hanging in your own closet right now. Maybe it's something else entirely. Whatever it is, it's proof of something worth trusting. That the years didn't take your beauty from you. They handed you a truer version of it, one you finally know how to see. Beauty was never a countdown. It was never something that peaked in your 20s and slowly leaked away with every birthday after. It was always something closer to a practice. And like anything worth practicing, it only gets truer with time. You are not less than you were. You are, in the ways that were always going to matter most, more. The younger woman in the photograph was beautiful, but she spent so much of her life wondering if she was enough that she rarely had the chance to enjoy it. The woman standing here today still has laugh lines, still has gray hairs, still has stories written across her face. But for the very first time, she knows she is beautiful. And that changes everything. Until next time, keep embracing your golden chapter.